Very important to talk about how he attacked the media when a prominent Republican, the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, just a couple of days ago said that the problem here is right-wing media and the misrepresentation of what's going on. Remember when in Ohio there was an attack against Haitians and they perpetuated this ridiculous myth that they were eating the cats and eating the dogs of their neighbors? Governor DeWine suggesting that the problem is fraud. It's not Somalis and it's not immigrants. And that's how all of this comes together. We have a lot to get to. I want to bring in MS Now's Alex Tabbitt, who's in Minneapolis for us, MS Now's Laura Barone-Lopez at the White House, Paul Butler, former federal prosecutor and MS Now legal analyst, and former assistant chief counsel for immigration and customs enforcement, Veronica Cardenas. Philip Bump, MS Now columnist and contributor, is back with me. Laura, I want to start with you because I think what we're hearing here reflects what we heard from the president, reflects what we heard from Secretary Noem. While there are these calls to turn down the temperature, the vice president of the United States just called Governor Tim Walz a joke, suggested he may have committed crimes himself, and again, blame the victim, seemed to blame the victim in this terrible shooting. Talk about the administration's approach to this very tense and intense situation.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head here when you were breaking down what the vice president is doing here, which is often the administration in situations like this goes on the attack. They are attacking the press. And it reminds me, actually, of prior comments made by a number of the president's allies, including Steve Bannon, who said, who is the real opposition? The media is the real opposition. And in cases, they try to flood the zone. And right now, the vice president is at a podium in the press room saying that they are going to create a new position, a new assistant attorney position that would look into fraud, because they are taking what were very clear examples and cases of fraud dating back to the Biden administration in Minnesota. And over the course of the last, more than the last month or so, they have started to use those very specific cases of individual cases of fraud to go after the Somali community, the legal immigrant community in Minnesota, and that is why they increase the number of ICE agents, of CBP agents on the ground in Minnesota at the start of this year. Just this past Sunday is when they deployed more than 1,000 ICE and CBP agents, started that surge, all in the name of cracking down on fraud and specifically targeting Somali immigrants. And this is something that they have essentially blown up into a demonization of this community in Minnesota. And you hear the vice president saying, again, as an investigation is ongoing, less than 24 hours into this investigation, that he is confident that Renee Good, the victim, was attempting to ram the car, despite the fact that the video that we have all seen and the analysis that has been put out by many of our colleagues at the New York Times and the Washington Post shows that there were multiple shots directed at Renee Good after the officer was no longer in front of the car. And multiple ICE agents that I have talked to, former ICE agents that I have talked to, veteran, longtime career agents, say that ICE agents are trained to not put themselves in front of vehicles, that is not a part of standard protocol. And so there are a lot of questions still that an investigation we would hope would answer about whether or not this was standard procedure, and that may very well could end up refuting what the vice president is out here saying so confidently as he attacks the press, Chris.
So I want to ask you, Veronica, about what J.D. Vance just said. We didn't hear this part, but the folks in the control room tell me he just said the vehicle went after the guy. That's obvious. And that follows the vice president saying this ICE agent had absolute immunity. What do you say to that?
Right. And that really surprised me, too, for him to speak in so absolute immunity that does not exist for ICE agents or officers, no matter how giving the law is to them. And a few points here. ICE has authority over non-citizens, not over U.S. citizens. And so to state what he's stating, this was a U.S. citizen, and she was, yes, she was in the car. We don't know all of the facts here. And so jumping to the conclusion to just say that, she was breaking all these laws and somehow that got her to be shot is just ridiculous and not supported by any of the facts. And so I wanted to go back to the aggression in Chicago and how at that point, there was a discussion of body cams. So this administration did not impose that, and it's something that needs to be done. ICE officers should be wearing body cams because we do need to know what is happening, what are the specific facts.
I think my old friend also, Philip Bump, asked a really, important question about this responsibility and investigation. And I keep going back to the phrase, what you see is what you get.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you come into, what you're looking at, what your preconceptions are. I mean, we saw Vance make a number of claims that were explicitly false and a lot that were dubious. I mean, he said, for example, that what the ICE was doing was trying to deport the millions of criminal aliens who came in during Biden, which is just flatly not true. Not only is ICE heavily targeting people who have no criminal background whatsoever, there weren't millions of people with criminal records that came in under Biden in the first place. So he's mushing together all these various arguments and pieces of rhetoric that the administration has been using for a long time to make this claim that this woman, even before the investigation has occurred, is part of this grand sweeping conspiracy that they're going to now crack down on. He was asked, is there any evidence of this? Does that make it a capital crime? He was unable to answer that.
Who bought the brick?
Yeah, who bought a brick? Like, bricks are so expensive. You got to have George Soros, front you the cost for the $1.85.
And then Kelly asked the question, is there any indication that, do you know something that we don't know about the background here?
Right, and he doesn't. But he makes all these assumptions, makes all these presentations. One of the things, and I wrote about this a little bit today, we see the administration repeatedly getting ahead of the facts so that they can, when the facts come out, say, those contradict our narrative, ergo, those people are lying and fraudulent. We saw him attack the media. Saw him attack CNN in particular in that way. That's what they do here. And, it's remarkable that, particularly in this moment, we see so much disingenuousness and dishonesty from these folks, especially when he said about fraud, we're looking at wrongdoing in Minneapolis and we're going to prosecute the bad guys. Well, okay, here's an opportunity to do that with the shooting that occurred with Make Good.
Yeah, we've never seen fraud like this in the history of our country. I'd like to see them back that up with the facts. Paul, the other thing that J.D. Vance said is they will have, he called it both an associate and an assistant attorney general. I'm not sure if there's a difference, but anyway, to work on investigating fraud in Minnesota. He said that role would have different powers than a special counsel. Can you help us understand that?
So, Jack Smith was the special counsel in the classified documents prosecution of Donald Trump. And Judge Eileen Cannon dismissed the prosecution because she said that the law authorizing a special counsel was unconstitutional. She thought that based on the appointments clause of the Constitution, that the Attorney General doesn't have the power to appoint a special counsel. So, Chris, this is an esoteric theory that hasn't been endorsed by anybody other than Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Not even the other conservative justices think that. Judge Cannon's decision was appealed, but of course, when Trump was reelected, the case was dismissed. But the DOJ agency that would typically investigate government fraud is my former squad, the Public Integrity Section. And the Trump administration has neutered that agency. It's reduced the lawyers from around 30 at the end of the Biden administration to around 3 or 4 now.
So we only have a minute left, Paul, but if I can, I want to ask you what you think happens now with this investigation. And people who are trying to keep an open mind have a lot of questions that they want answered. Where does this go?
So it's clear that the administration's strategy is full on victim blaming, saying that Ms. Good is responsible for her own death. The vice president said that she broke the law. The Secretary of Homeland Security said that she had been harassing officers. Chris, even if that's true, impeding law enforcement is not a legal reason to use deadly force. If Ms. Good was a suspect in a crime, they had her license plate, they could have arrested her later, or if they thought it was important to take her into custody immediately, they could have followed her in the car and arrested her in a safe place. Real quickly, in the last